Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a concept that connects, well, pretty much everything, from antibiotic resistance to why you even have a tailbone. We're talking about evolution. And while it's a word we all think we know, its real meaning, that often gets lost in translation.
Okay, so this phrase, survival of the fittest, we've all heard it a million times. It sounds so simple, so intuitive, but here's the thing. It wasn't even Darwin who originally coined it, and the way we use it today, it's probably one of the biggest misconceptions in all of science. So, if it's not about being the strongest or fastest, what does fittest actually mean? To get to the bottom of that, we first need to get a really clear picture of what evolution is, and, just as important, what it isn't. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to get our definitions straight. Then, we'll look at the actual engines of evolutionary change. After that, we'll dig into the incredible evidence, bust some of the most common myths, and finally, we'll connect it all to the big picture. All right, first things first. Before we can really build this idea up, we need to lay a solid foundation. And that means getting our most important terms straight, because this is where, honestly, most of the confusion really begins. Okay, so let's start with the word theory. Now, in everyday chat, a theory is just a hunch. I have a theory about who ate the last slice of pizza. But in science, a theory is an absolute heavyweight. It's a massive explanation for how the world works, backed by mountains and mountains of evidence, just like the theory of gravity. And that brings us to fittest. This has nothing to do with being the strongest animal in the jungle. In biology, fitness is all about how well an organism fits into its very specific environment long enough to have kids. A polar bear is incredibly fit for the Arctic, but it would be hopelessly unfit for the desert. Context is absolutely everything.
Okay, so if evolution is change over time, how does that change actually happen? What are the engines that are driving it? Let's pop the hood and take a look inside the engine room.
Well, the main engine is natural selection, and it works in these 4 basic steps. First, you've got variation. Look around. No 2 individuals are exactly alike. Second, those traits are inherited. Third, in any given environment, some of those traits just happen to give an advantage for surviving and reproducing. And finally, over many, many generations, those helpful traits naturally become more common. It's like a slow, steady filtering process.
But here's the kicker. Natural selection is not the only force at play. There are other really powerful forces that can stir the genetic pot, often in ways that are way more random and unpredictable.
First up, you have mutation. You can think of it as a random typo in the genetic instruction book. Now, most of these typos don't do much, and some can be bad. But every once in a while, a mutation creates a totally new trait that just happens to be beneficial. It's the ultimate source of all novelty in biology. And then there's genetic drift. This is basically evolution by pure dumb luck. It has nothing to do with being fitter. Just imagine a random forest fire wipes out most of a beetle population. The survivors aren't necessarily the best, they're just the lucky ones. And their genes, by pure chance, will now define the future of that population.
So we have these powerful mechanisms of change. But, how do we really know this has been happening for billions of years? Well, the evidence is just overwhelming. And it comes from all corners of science, like different chapters in a gigantic, ancient book. The most famous chapter, of course, is the fossil record. These are literally snapshots in time preserved in rock. They give us a physical timeline showing exactly how species have changed, how they've adapted, and how they've branched off over millions and millions of years.
Anatomy tells another incredible story. So just take a look at the limbs you see here. A human arm, a cat's leg, a bat's wing, a dolphin's flipper. They all do totally different things, right? But if you look at the bones inside, they're all built from the exact same fundamental parts. That's what we call a homologous structure, and it's a massive clue that they all share a common ancestor.
Now, let's contrast that with this. A bird's wing and a bee's wing both do the same thing. They're for flight. But their internal structure, completely different. They evolved totally independently. These are called analogous structures, and they show us how different species can stumble upon the same solution to the same problem. And when you piece all of this evidence together, you get this absolutely incredible story that's written across billions of years. This just gives you a tiny glimpse of that epic timeline, from the very first simple cells almost 4 billion years ago, all the way to us. It's just an amazing journey.
Okay, so now that we have a solid foundation built, let's do some rapid-fire myth-busting. Let's clear the air on some of the most common misconceptions about evolution that really seem to trip people up.
All right, here's a big one. You might think, well, I can go to the gym and get stronger,
and a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. So, do individuals evolve?
And the answer is a simple no. An individual is born with a set of genes, and those genes don't change during your lifetime. What evolves is the entire population, as a whole, over many, many generations, as the frequency of different genes shifts.
And now for what might be the biggest myth of all. Does the theory of evolution actually explain how life first got started on Earth?
This one is a really important distinction. No, it doesn't. The theory of evolution kicks in after life has already begun. It explains the how that first spark of life could branch out and diversify into every living thing we see today. But the question of how life started in the first place, that's a fascinating but separate scientific puzzle.
For instance, there are other incredible ideas, like the endosymbiont theory you see here, which suggests how simple cells might have teamed up to form the complex cells we have today. It's a huge part of the history of life, for sure, but it's separate from the mechanism of natural selection.
Okay, so let's zoom out. We've gone through the what, the how, and the evidence. But at the end of the day, why does any of this really matter to us right here, right now?
Because evolution isn't some dusty old history lesson. It is happening all around us right now. We see it in viruses that constantly mutate, in bacteria that become resistant to our best drugs, and in species trying to adapt to a rapidly changing climate. Understanding evolution is absolutely essential for modern medicine, for conservation, and really, for understanding our own place in this incredible web of life. And it leaves us with this huge open question. As the world keeps changing, where is this unstoppable process taking all of us next?